Barrack number 17. Prisoner of war, Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. The 3rd of May, 1943. When the American officer opened the dining hall doors, 78 Japanese soldiers froze. In front of them stood laid-out tables, not wooden bunks in 2 tiers, as on the transport ships. Not the cold concrete floor, as in Australia after capitulation, but real tables with white tablecloths. At every place lay forks and knives. Private Yamamoto Kenji, 22 years old, a native of Niigata Prefecture, wrote in his diary 30 years later, "I was convinced this was a trap. Knives could only mean one thing. They were pushing us toward escape or attack. Then we would get a bullet and it would all be over." No one dared to sit. They stood, staring at the white cloths as if at a minefield. The officer repeated the order in English. The interpreter, a Japanese American from California, translated into Japanese. His voice trembled. He himself did not believe what he was saying. The first to sit was Lieutenant Nakamura. He was 31, had studied at Tokyo University, and read Dickens in the original language. He picked up a fork cautiously, as though it might explode in his hands. Gradually, the others sat down too. This scene is documented. The archives of the U.S. National Administration preserve the report of Lieutenant Colonel James Hunt, Commandant of Camp Claiborne, dated the 5th of May, 1943. It describes in detail the first dinner of Japanese prisoners of war. By the spring of 1943, Americans had captured fewer than 200 Japanese. The reason was obvious. Japanese soldiers did not surrender. From the beginning of the Pacific War in December 1941 until April 1943, the Allies captured about 150,000 prisoners. Of those, Germans and Italians numbered 148,000. Japanese, only 184. This was no statistical coincidence. It was the result of a culture in which surrender meant disgrace worse than death. Senku Boku, the military code of the Imperial Army of 1941, commanded, "Never endure the shame of captivity," not "avoid if possible," not "only in the last resort," but "never." Therefore, in the spring of 1943, when the first significant group of Japanese was captured in New Guinea, military psychologists faced a phenomenon they could not understand. The prisoners not only refused to cooperate, they could not grasp why they had not been killed immediately. In the report of Captain Sherwood Moran, a military psychiatrist in an Australian camp, there is a line, "They look as if we have broken the rules of a game everyone knows, but we do not know those rules." The Japanese expected execution. Instead, they received medical care, food, and, strangest of all to them, observance of the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention of 1929, ratified by the United States in 1932, carefully regulated the treatment of prisoners of war. Japan signed the document but never ratified it, and therefore did not follow it. Americans faced this during the Bataan Death March in April 1942. Of 60,000 American and Filipino prisoners, about 10,000 died on the way to Camp O'Donnell. The U.S., however, adhered to the convention unilaterally, not out of naivety, but out of cold calculation. A memorandum of the War Department dated the 12th of January, 1943 stated, "Treatment of Japanese prisoners of war, according to the highest standards, has 2 aims. First, to encourage other Japanese soldiers to surrender. Second, to create a precedent for the treatment of our men in captivity." The second aim did not materialize. The Japanese remained brutal toward American prisoners, but the first gradually produced results. By the end of the war, more than 40,000 Japanese were in American camps. The first were those 184 who arrived at Camp Claiborne on the 3rd of May, 1943. They expected death. Instead, they received forks. This story is not only about humanity or cruelty, it is about the clash of 2 worlds, systems of values that seemed incompatible, about the meeting of a culture in which capitulation equaled eternal shame with a world in which even prisoners had rights, about men trained to die who instead had to learn to live. Camp Claiborne existed from May 1943 until November 1945. During that time, 2,362 Japanese soldiers passed through it. For most, it was the first dinner at a table covered with a white cloth. and nearly everyone was convinced this was the last meal of his life. They were wrong, but they could realize that only later. The transport ship Monterey departed from Brisbane on the 21st of April, 1943. On board, 184 Japanese prisoners, 42 American guards, 3 interpreters, and 1 military doctor. The ship's captain, Robert Mackenzie, 53 years old, a veteran of the merchant fleet, at first thought the order was a mistake. He had been told, "Provide the prisoners with conditions identical to those of American soldiers on board." He telephoned headquarters. They repeated it, word for word. The prisoners were housed in hold number 2, not in cages, in regular crew cabins, 4 men per cabin designed for 2. Cramped, but the same rules applied to American soldiers during transport. Private Sato Hideo, 19 years old, captured in New Guinea with a bullet wound in the thigh, wrote in his diary, "They gave us blankets, real blankets, not sacks. I held this blanket in my hands for 5 minutes before I understood it was for me." The first night at sea passed without sleep. None of the prisoners could fall asleep. Sergeant O'Hara Keisuke, 27 years old, a professional soldier with 10 years of service, explained to the younger men they were waiting for the moment the ship entered international waters. Then, they would simply be thrown overboard. Easier that way, they said. No need to waste bullets, no need to file reports. Morning came, breakfast was brought. American soldiers set pots on deck. Rice. Real rice, not thin gruel, canned meat, bread, coffee. Interpreter, Sergeant Thomas Yamada, a Japanese American from Seattle, declared in Japanese, "You will receive 3 meals a day, the same ration as American soldiers. If anyone needs medical help, report to the doctor." His voice was calm, but his eyes showed the knowledge of both cultures and the fears of those he translated for. The prisoners did not touch the food. They sat and stared at the pots as if it's something suspicious. Yamada understood their thoughts. Himself born in Japan, he had emigrated at age 8 and knew well the meaning of the word betrayal in their system of values. "The food is not poisoned," he said in Japanese. "I will eat first." He took some rice, ate slowly and methodically, waited 5 minutes, then 5 more, then said simple words. "See, I am alive." The first to take a plate was Private Tanaka Yoshio, 20 years old, a farmer's son from Kumamoto Prefecture. He had not eaten for 2 days since capture. Hunger proved stronger than fear. When Tanaka did not drop dead, the others began to eat. The journey lasted 13 days. The Monterey steamed across the Pacific Ocean to San Francisco. From there, the prisoners were to be taken by rail to Louisiana. The military doctor, Captain Donald Gregory, 38 years old, a surgeon from Boston, examined the prisoners daily. In his report of the 23rd of April, he wrote, "Average weight, 48 kilograms at an average height of 162 centimeters. Signs of chronic malnutrition in 100% of those examined. Scurvy in 32%, dysentery in 15%, malaria in 20%. Gregory insisted on doubling the rations. He was refused. An order is an order. The ration must be identical to that of American soldiers. Then the doctor began to add vitamin supplements, ascorbic acid for scurvy, hexquinine for malaria. Private Kubo Tetsuo, 24 years old, an elementary school teacher from Osaka, conscripted in 1941, wrote, "The American doctor comes every day. He does not speak Japanese, but with gestures asks to open the mouth, show hands, remove the shirt. Then he gives tablets, white and yellow. I do not know what they are, but after the white tablets my gums stopped bleeding." This was the first sign of improvement from scurvy. On the 3rd of May, the Monterey entered San Francisco Bay. The prisoners saw the city through the portholes for the first time. The bridge over the strait, the Golden Gate, the Bay Bridge, the city climbing the hills. Lieutenant Nakamura, the only officer among the prisoners who spoke English, approached the interpreter and asked, "Is this truly San Francisco?" "Yes," Yamada answered. "The city is not damaged," Nakamura added, thoughtful. "We were told the Imperial Air Force bombed American cities, that America burned." Yamada did not know what to reply. Indeed, he had no words. The prisoners were unloaded at night, not for publicity, but for security reasons. Headquarters feared sabotage not from the prisoners themselves, but from Japanese Americans who might try to free them. These fears were paradoxical. In May 1943, many Japanese Americans themselves were behind barbed wire in internment camps after the signing of Executive Order 9066 by President Roosevelt in February 1942. But an order is an order. Unloading at night, convoy to the railway station, special train. The train departed on the 4th of May at 5 in the morning. 8 cars, 2 for prisoners, 1 for guards, 1 for medical personnel, 4 for equipment and supplies. Each car held 20 people. Wooden benches ran along the walls. The windows were closed with wooden shutters, so civilians would not see the Japanese. But the shutters had slits. Through those slits, the prisoners saw America. Sato Hideo kept a diary. His notebook is preserved in the archive of the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. 73 pages in small handwriting in Japanese. The translation was done in 1982 by Professor Kenji Hasegawa of the University of California. The 5th of May, 10 o'clock in the morning. The train stopped at a station. Through the slit, I see a platform. People, many people. They are not thin. Women in bright dresses, children eating something like ice cream in wartime. I do not understand. The train crossed Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, 3,200 kilometers in 4 days. Private Fujita Masao, 30 years old, an engineer from Yokohama, wrote, "The 6th of May, somewhere in the mountains." The interpreter said, "These are the Rocky Mountains. We climbed for 3 hours. Outside the window only mountains and forests. No traces of war, no destroyed villages, no bomb craters. Either America is so huge that the war did not touch it, or we were lied to. The second was true. The Imperial Army systematically misled its soldiers. Japanese troops were told that America was on the verge of defeat, that American cities lay in ruins, that the population was starving and ready to surrender. In fact, continental America had not suffered large-scale bombings. The only ephemeral attempt, Operation Fugo with balloon bombs, began only in November of 1944 and had no significant consequences. Sergeant O'Hara wrote, "The 7th of May, evening. The train stopped to refuel. The station was lit, not dim, not saving, bright. Lamps burn everywhere. I remember blackouts in Tokyo from 1942. After 8 in the evening, the whole city was dark. And here, in the middle of the war, they shine as if there is no war." On the 8th of May, the train arrived in Louisiana. Camp Claiborne lay 15 kilometers from Alexandria in a wooded area by the Red River. The camp had been built in the spring of 1942 for German prisoners, the first captured in North Africa after Operation Torch. By May of 1943, the camp held about 2,000 German prisoners of war. They were transferred to another camp, Camp Zivi in Texas. The barrack was cleaned, disinfected, and prepared for new residents. Lieutenant Colonel James Hunt, 46 years old, a career officer with 25 years of service, had been appointed commandant of the camp in March. With the appointment came a special instruction from Washington. Treatment of Japanese prisoners must differ from treatment of Germans. The Germans understand surrender. They give up when resistance is futile and are not ashamed of it. Japanese prisoners do not surrender voluntarily. They are captured wounded, unconscious, or in extraordinary circumstances. For them, capitulation is national shame. Treatment must take this cultural context into account. The instruction ran 19 pages. Hunt read it 3 times, then called his deputy, Captain Richard Stevens, and said, "Richard, I do not understand half of what is written here myself, but the point is one. These men expect us to kill them, and our task is to convince them we will not." Buses entered the camp at 7 in the evening. The sun still clung above the pines. A May evening in Louisiana is long and hot. 34 degrees, humidity about 80%. The prisoners were lined up on the parade ground. Lieutenant Colonel Hunt stepped forward. Interpreter Yamada stood beside him. Hunt spoke slowly, in short phrases, allowing a pause for translation after each sentence. "You are prisoners of war of the United States of America. You will remain here until the end of the war. You will receive medical care, food, clothing. You will not be tortured. You will not be forced to work against your will. If you follow the camp rules, you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. Yamada translated word for word. The prisoners stood motionless. Some looked at the ground, others looked through Hunt's figure as if it did not exist. Now you will be distributed to barracks, Hunt continued. Each is designed for 70 people. Beds, blankets, basic personal items. Showers and toilets are in a separate building. Dinner is at 8 in the mess hall. He paused and added what no instruction contained. You probably think I am deceiving you, that this is a trap. I understand. In your place, I would think the same. But I tell the truth. And you will see that for yourselves. Yamada translated, and for the first time, a personal intonation sounded in his voice. Not merely a rendering of content, but a conveyance of attitude. The prisoners were taken to their quarters. Barrack number 17, the closest to the medical building. 78 men instead of 70. 2 had been taken to the hospital at the station. Malaria had flared up. Inside, 2 rows of double-decker beds, wooden frames, metal mesh, mattresses. It is hard to call them soft, but they were mattresses. At each place, 2 blankets, a pillow, a sheet. Private Yamamoto Kenji stood for several minutes by his bed. He touched the mattress carefully, then the pillow. "This is a real bed," he said aloud. No one answered. Everyone did the same, stood, looked, and did not dare lie down. Lieutenant Nakamura was the first to lie down, not because he was the bravest, but because he understood. If the officer did not lie down, no one would. Everyone needed sleep. They had not had normal rest since capture. Nakamura lay on his back and looked at the ceiling. Wooden beams, a hanging electric bulb, unlit but real. Gradually, the others began to lie down. At 8, there was a knock on the door. An American soldier entered, said a few phrases in English. Yamada, interpreters were housed with the prisoners, voiced them. "Dinner. The mess hall is 30 meters to the right. You have 10 minutes. The prisoners stood and lined up by the exit. The soldier looked surprised and, again through Yamada, added, "You do not need to form a column. Just go to the mess hall." They marched in formation anyway. Habit is stronger than words. The mess hall was a separate wooden building with large windows. Inside, tables for 6, white tablecloths. At each place, a plate, a fork, a knife, a spoon, and the scene repeated itself, the one with which our story began. Tables, forks, knives. The prisoners stopped as if they had hit an invisible boundary and froze. Private Tanaka Yoshio could not sleep. The 4th night in camp, 3 o'clock, he lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling. Nearby, Sato snored. From the lower bunk came heavy breathing from Fujita. Malaria had not retreated even with quinine. At the end of the barrack, a bed creaked. Someone turned in his sleep. Tanaka could not sleep because he did not believe he would wake. He was born in the village of Yamaguchi, Kumamoto Prefecture, in the southwest of Kyushu. 360 inhabitants, rice fields, 1 school with 4 classes. His father cultivated 2 tan of land, about 2,000 square meters. That was enough to avoid hunger, but left nothing extra. In 1940, when Tanaka turned 18, he was conscripted. Basic training in Kagoshima, then the 41st Infantry Division, then transferred to Indonesia and New Guinea. On the 15th of March 1943, his unit was ambushed on New Guinea. The Americans surrounded them near the Kumusi River. The commander died in the first minutes. The deputy ordered a retreat. There was nowhere to retreat. All routes were cut off. Tanaka received a shrapnel wound to his left shoulder, fell, and fainted. He regained consciousness in an American field hospital, his arm bandaged. The first sensation, surprise, he was alive. The second, shame. He had surrendered. He had not committed seppuku, not blown himself up with a grenade, not charged the enemy with a knife. He had simply fallen and fainted. Now, lying in a barrack at Camp Claiborne, he thought, perhaps the Americans simply do not know what to do with prisoners. They hold us temporarily, until they decide how to kill us. 4 days passed. Every day, 3 meals, beds, medical care. On the 5th day, Captain Stevens gathered everyone on the parade ground. Yamada stood beside him. "Today, you will undergo a full medical examination," Stevens said. "A doctor will examine each of you. Those who require treatment will be transferred to the hospital. Others will be vaccinated. Vaccinations. The word was familiar. In the army, they were vaccinated against typhus and cholera, but why vaccinate prisoners? The examination took place in the camp hospital. 3 doctors, 5 nurses, 4 interpreters. Each prisoner underwent 5 stages: weighing, measuring height, inspection of skin and mucous membranes, auscultation of heart and lungs, and blood sampling. Captain Donald Gregory, the same doctor from the Monterey, supervised the process. His assistant, Lieutenant Janice Collins, 32 years old, a nurse from Oregon, recorded the data on individual cards. Tanaka Yoshio, Gregory read, 20 years old, height 158 centimeters, weight. He looked at the scales. Tanaka stood barefoot, stripped to the waist, thin, ribs visible. 43 kilograms, Collins dictated. Body mass index 17.2, Gregory calculated. Pronounced undernourishment. He listened to the heart, lungs, checked throat and eyes. Signs of scurvy on the gums, anemia, judging by mucous membranes, skin dry, peeling, vitamin deficiency. Scar on the left shoulder, a fresh wound, healing poorly, risk of infection. Collins noted it down. Prescription, double doses of B vitamins, ascorbic acid 2 grams per day, iron. Increase caloric content of the diet by 30%. Recheck in 1 week. Tanaka did not understand English, but he heard the tone. They spoke to him not as a condemned man, but as a patient. By evening, they had examined everyone. The picture repeated: chronic malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, anemia, in 1/3, parasitic infections, in every 5th, malaria or latent tuberculosis. Gregory submitted a report to Hunt. It contained a sentence: by medical indicators, these people have lived at the edge of starvation for at least 6 months. Average weight loss, 25% of normal. Under such conditions, the body begins to consume its own muscles. 1 more month, and irreversible changes will begin. Hunt read and thought. They had fought in such a state, hungry, sick, exhausted, and still held on. He had seen German prisoners. They surrendered when resistance ceased to make sense. The Japanese did not surrender even when they could barely stand. He forwarded the report to the War Department in Washington and added a summary. I recommend increasing the ration for Japanese prisoners by 50% for a period of 2 months. The standard ration, sufficient for a healthy person, is inadequate for the exhausted. The reply came in 3 days. Approved. On the 12th of May, 1943, rice with chicken was served in the Camp Claiborne mess hall. Not canned food, fresh, sautéed meat with vegetables. Private Kubo Tetsuo, a school teacher from Osaka, stared at the plate in disbelief. A piece of thigh, white rice, carrots, and some green vegetables he did not recognize. Is this really chicken? He asked Sato beside him. Seems like chicken. When did you last eat it? Sato thought. On New Year's, 1941. Father bought one for the family. We ate it for 2 days. Kubo picked up his fork. In a week, he had learned to use it, first clumsily, holding it like a pencil, then correctly. Now he took food almost as deftly as with chopsticks. He cut a piece, put it in his mouth, chewed slowly. The taste flared at once. Meat juices, salt, an unfamiliar spice that made everything richer. His eyes suddenly grew wet. He did not cry because of the taste. Memory of home had returned. His Osaka house in the Tennoji district. Small, wooden, 2 rooms and a kitchen. His wife Yuki and daughter Ayako. Ayako had been 4 when he was drafted. Now she was 6. He imagined her sitting at the low table, eating rice with vegetables. Perhaps already without vegetables. In Japan, in 1943, everything was scarce. Rationing, since 1941, and growing stricter. He had written Yuki 1 letter, in February of 1943, before captivity. I am healthy. We have enough food. Do not worry. That was not true. He already showed signs of scurvy, and their unit received half the official norm. Logistics were collapsing. He lied so his wife would not worry. And now he was sitting in an American camp eating chicken, real chicken, and thinking that Yuki and Ayako likely had only rice porridge with radish. If they were lucky, that thought made him set the fork down. The food would not go down. Sergeant O'Hara, sitting at the next table, noticed and came over. "Kubo, eat." "I cannot." "Why?" "My family does not have this." O'Hara sat beside him, looked at Kubo's plate, then at his own, where half the portion remained. "Your family would want you to eat," he said softly. "If you die of hunger, it will not make their lives easier. If you survive, perhaps one day you will return." "How would I return? I am a prisoner. I am a shame to my family." O'Hara was silent for a moment. Then he said something he did not expect from himself. "Perhaps the war will end. Perhaps we will return. Perhaps what we did will lose its weight. Do you believe that?" "No, but you must eat." Kubo took the fork again and finished the chicken. Each piece went down hard, as if he were chewing not meat, but his own guilt. Later he would write in his diary, "The Americans feed us better than our army fed us at the front." What does that mean? That we fought not for Japan, but for a mistake? Many prisoners asked themselves this question. There was no answer. The ration at Camp Claiborne was regulated by a War Department order of the 8th of January, 1943. 32 pages of standards for prisoners of war. Daily calories, 3,000 kilocalories. Proteins, 100 grams. Fats, 80. Carbohydrates, 400. Plus vitamins, minerals, fiber. It was the same ration as American soldiers received at rear bases. For comparison, the official ration of a Japanese soldier at the front, 2,600 kilocalories, on paper. In reality, because communications were shattered, most units received half, sometimes less. German prisoners in American camps often complained about the food. It seemed bland to them, and they appealed to the Red Cross for improvements. Japanese prisoners did not complain. They finished everything and could not believe this was real. On the 15th of May, Lieutenant Nakamura requested a meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Hunt. Interpreter Yamada relayed the request. Hunt agreed. They set it for 6 in the evening in the commandant's office. Nakamura arrived precisely at 6. He had washed and combed his hair, trying to look neat as far as a uniform he had not changed for a month and a half allowed. Hunt sat at the desk. Yamada stood nearby. In the corner was Captain Stevens, the deputy commandant. "Sit down," Hunt said. Nakamura sat, keeping straight, palms on his knees. "You wish to speak with me," said Hunt. "I am listening." Nakamura spoke in Japanese, Yamada translating phrase by phrase. "Sir, I am the senior by rank among the prisoners. In practice, I am responsible for order in the group. I request permission to organize several things." "Which things exactly?" "Morning exercises, cleaning of the barrack by schedule, distribution of duties." Hunt nodded. "Go on." "The men have lost the structure of the day. In the army there was a routine. Here they wake up, eat, and sit in the barrack. This erodes discipline, and without discipline, he did not finish." Hunt understood. "You want to restore military order?" "Yes, but you are not in the ranks, you are prisoners." "I understand, but these men are still soldiers. They need order," Hunt thought. Stevens looked at him, awaiting a decision. "All right," Hunt said. "You may organize morning calisthenics and assign duties within the barrack, but no drilling and parades. This must be physical exercise, not training for combat." "Understood. Anything else?" Nakamura hesitated for a moment. "An altar." "I beg your pardon?" "We would like to have a small altar in the barrack for prayer." Hunt turned to Yamada. "Explain." "Shinto," Yamada said. "They pray to their ancestors. A simple shelf is needed, a candle, a few sacred paper streamers. Nothing dangerous." "Which symbols exactly?" "Paper, inscriptions, no metal, no blades, only ritual elements." "The instructions said nothing about such a thing." Hunt thought again. "I have to clear this with Washington," he said. "I will inform you of the answer within a week." Nakamura bowed. "Thank you, sir." After the meeting, Hunt called Stevens. "What do you think, Rick? Exercises are fine, but the altar? Could there be some scheme?" "What kind?" "I do not know. It is just... we poorly understand their customs." Hunt smiled slightly. "If they were plotting something, they would not ask permission. Nakamura is smart. He wants to keep his men from losing their minds." He wrote to Washington. The answer arrived in 5 days, permitted, under supervision. On the 20th of May, a shrine appeared in barrack number 17, a shelf 2 meters high along the far wall. On it, white paper with characters brushed by Private Yamamoto, who had studied calligraphy before the war, a candle in a small glass, a little bowl for a symbolic offering of rice. That evening, the prisoners gathered by the shelf. Nakamura stood in front and bowed. The others repeated the motion. He whispered a prayer in the old language of the shrines, words about ancestors, home, the peace of the souls of the dead. American guards stood by the door. They did not understand the words, but they caught the intonation. "They are praying," whispered Corporal James McNeil, 30 years old, a farmer from Iowa. "Yes," Stevens replied. "I did not know the Japanese had something like this." Stevens kept silent. He watched and thought, these men have lost their country, their honor, their future, but they still pray. That means they still hold on. After the prayer, the barrack grew quiet. For the first time in 2 weeks, truly, without hidden anxiety, without clenched tension. Private Sato wrote in his diary, "Today we prayed. I do not know whether the gods hear us here, across the ocean, on enemy soil, but we prayed, and it became easier." The next morning at 6, the prisoners went out to the parade ground. Nakamura stood in front and commanded. "Fall in." They formed up, 4 ranks of 20. Arms up, bends, squats. The exercises lasted 20 minutes, nothing complicated. Basic movements, a warm-up. But it was already structure, order, something familiar in a completely foreign world. The American soldiers watched from a distance. McNeil said quietly to Stevens, "They are doing calisthenics." "Yes." "Why?" "They are prisoners." Perhaps for that very reason. Stevens could not explain it better, but he understood. These men were holding on to the last things they had left. Discipline, rituals, structure. Without that, they would have broken. On the 27th of May, 1943, Lieutenant Colonel Hunt received a directive from Washington. 3 pages, signed by General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff. Prisoners of war are permitted to write letters to relatives. Letters are subject to censorship. Frequency, 1 letter per month. Length, no more than 1 page. Forbidden, data about the location of the camp, the number of prisoners, conditions of detention, any military information. Hunt read it 3 times and called Captain Stevens. "Rick, they are allowed to write home." "The Japanese?" "Yes." Stevens whistled softly. "How will those letters get through?" "We are at war. Through neutral countries, the Red Cross, Switzerland, or Portugal, and then to Japan. Do you think the Japanese will deliver them to families? I do not know, but we are obliged to try." On the 30th of May, interpreter Yamada gathered the prisoners in the mess hall and announced the news. "You are allowed to write letters home, 1 per month, paper and pencils, free of charge. Letters will be checked and sent through the Red Cross." Silence. No joy, only frozen faces. "Questions?" Yamada asked. Lieutenant Nakamura raised his hand. "If we write, will our families learn that we are alive?" "Yes." "Exactly. And will they learn that we are prisoners?" "Yes." Nakamura lowered his eyes. "Then I will not write." A dull murmur of approval rolled through the hall. "Why?" Yamada could not help asking. "Your loved ones think you died." "Better that," Nakamura whispered, "than to learn that we are a disgrace." Sergeant O'Hara added, "For our families, it is better to have a dead hero than a living coward." Yamada was silent. He knew Japanese culture, but he thought like an American. To live means to have a chance. For them, to live meant to carry shame. "They refuse?" Hunt asked after the report. "Almost all. Perhaps 2 or 3 will write." Hunt thought and said, "Leave paper and pencils in the barrack. Do not force anyone. Whoever wishes will write." For 3 days, the stack of sheets remained untouched. On the night of the 4th day, Private Kubo Tetsuo got up, quietly took a sheet and a pencil, and returned to his bunk. Under the dim bulb, he wrote, "Dear Yuki." For 15 minutes, he traced and rewrote the same lines. "I am alive. I am healthy. Do not worry. Embrace Ayako. Tell her that her father loves her. Tell her that her father will come back." Untrue, he was a prisoner and did not believe in returning, but he wrote because he could not do otherwise. In the morning after exercises, he handed the letter to Yamada. "I have written," he said quietly, "but I am not sure it should be sent." "Why?" "If she receives it, she will learn that I am a prisoner. She will have to tell the neighbors. They will call her husband a traitor. You are not a traitor, you survived. For the Japanese, that is the same thing. And for you?" Pause. "Send it, let her know." By the end of June 14 of 184 had written letters. All past censorship. Captain Stevens read them through an interpreter. Not a single word about the camp or conditions. Only, "I am alive, I am healthy, do not worry." The packet went to Geneva, from there to Portugal, and then by Japanese ship to Yokohama. Not a single letter was seen by its addressee. In August of 1943, the Japanese Government Information Bureau registered the shipment, entered the names on lists, and destroyed the correspondence. The Empire's official position: Japanese soldiers do not surrender. Prisoners do not exist. Therefore, neither do their letters. The families of the 14 never learned that their sons, husbands, and fathers were alive. Kubo learned of this only in 1946, already at home. Returning to his Osaka neighborhood, he discovered that Yuki had received a notice of his death in April of 1943 and had held a funeral ceremony. A memorial tablet with his name stood on the household altar. When he knocked on the door, Yuki fainted. She thought she saw a ghost. On the 5th of June, 1943, Hunt received another directive. Prisoners may be employed in accordance with Article 27 of the Geneva Convention: permitted work, agriculture, logging, construction of non-military facilities, and industry without military purpose. Pay, 80 cents per working day. Schedule, 8 hours per day, 6 days per week. Hunt snorted. "They want to pay prisoners?" "Geneva Convention," Stevens reminded him. Hunt knew Article 27 by heart. Labor was permitted, but only non-military and paid. He called Yamada. "Tell them, work is voluntary and paid." Paid? 80 cents a day. They will not believe it. Nor do I. But an order is an order. On the 8th of June, Yamada explained the terms. Local farms, 8 hours, 6 days, 80 cents. Silence. "No one will force you," he added. Sergeant O'Hara asked, "What can you buy for 80 cents? Stevens estimated, a pack of cigarettes, 10 cents, a chocolate bar, 5, a notebook, 3, a newspaper, 2. Private Yamamoto said, "I will go." "Why?" Nakamura asked. "Because doing nothing is worse. At home, I worked in rice fields. Here, I will work in American fields. What is the difference?" By evening, 38 had signed up. On the 9th of June, they were taken to the farm of John McCarthy, 8 kilometers from the camp. McCarthy, 62 years old, a third-generation farmer, had 180 acres, approximately 73 hectares, cotton, corn, vegetables. Half his workers had gone to the front, so he applied to use prisoners. His request was approved. The truck stopped at the gate. The prisoners formed up. Corporal McNeil held his rifle. At the ready. "These all?" McCarthy asked. "Yes, sir, 38. "Do they know how to work?" Private Tanaka stepped forward. "I am a farmer from Kyushu. Rice." "Rice is not cotton," McCarthy nodded. "But if your hands know, you will teach." Green rows of young cotton stretched across the fields. Weeds grew between them. "Your task is hand-weeding, carefully, without harming the plants. Understood?" Work began at 7 in the morning. The sun pressed down at once, 28 degrees Celsius and nearly 90% humidity. The prisoners moved along the rows, bent over, pulled grass, stuffed it into sacks. Slowly, carefully, they did not know cotton. After an hour, McCarthy came to Tanaka. "You are doing it right, show the others." By noon, the pace increased. At 11, a break. The farmer's wife, Martha, brought water and lemonade. They drank greedily. The heat sapped their strength. "Jim, lower the weapon," McCarthy asked. "Sir?" "They will not run. Look, they can barely stand." "The order is to keep it at the ready. An order is an order, but I do not want them thinking I am afraid of them." McNeil lowered the rifle. The prisoners noticed. Their shoulders eased a little. They worked until 6. 11 hours with 2 breaks. They weeded about 3 acres, about 1 hectare. For a first day, acceptable. "We will continue tomorrow," McCarthy said. They returned to camp barely lifting their feet. Backs burned, hands trembled. In the evening, Yamamoto came to Yamada. "When will they pay the money?" "At the end of the week. I want to buy paper and a pencil." "Why?" "To write a letter. If I earned it, it means I am not only a prisoner, I am still a person." On the 15th of June, they issued the first wages, $4.80 to each, 80 cents times 6 days. Real dollars and cents in the hands of men who yesterday had nothing. Sato bought 2 packs of cigarettes and a notebook. Fujita, 3 chocolate bars. Yamamoto, paper, pencils, stamps. By the end of the month, another 18 prisoners wrote letters home, and not a single one of those arrived either. On the 20th of June, 1943, Army Chaplain Major Robert Jenkins, 43 years old, a Baptist from Georgia, arrived at Camp Claiborne. Since 1940, he had served with American units, but now headquarters assigned him to the prisoners. "Major, welcome to Camp Claiborne." Hunt shook his hand. "Lieutenant Colonel, have you seen the directive?" Jenkins asked. "Spiritual support for Japanese prisoners. I am not sure how that is done." "Why?" "Because I am a Christian, and they are not." Hunt smiled. "I was told you are the best chaplain in the region. I do not know how either, but we need to try. I can speak about God, Christ, salvation, but their faith is different. Shinto, Buddhism." "Both," Hunt clarified. "That is what the interpreter says. Let me at least meet them. I will figure out what hurts." On the 21st of June, 23 gathered in the mess hall. Attendance voluntary. Jenkins came in civilian clothes so as not to pressure them with a uniform. Yamada stood beside him. "Good day. I am Robert Jenkins. I am a minister. My work is to help people find peace," he said. Yamada translated. "You have lost much. Home, family, country. You may feel anger, fear, shame. That is natural." Private Hayashi Takeshi, 32 years old, raised his hand. "Is your God the God of Americans? The God of all people? Then why does he allow war?" The chaplain had heard this question from every combat veteran. "I do not know God's plans, but I believe even in darkness there is light." "We believe in the Emperor," Hayashi said. "The Emperor is a living God. We betrayed him by falling into captivity. How will you help traitors?" Jenkins considered. This was not merely a different religion. It was a different logic of the world. "You are not traitors. You are those who survived. Survival is not a sin. For us, it is." The meeting lasted an hour. Jenkins spoke of forgiveness and hope. The prisoners listened politely. But the chaplain saw that his words did not touch the core. "They lack not faith in God," he later told Hunt. "They are crushed by an excess of faith in a sacred duty to the Emperor." "What do you advise?" "They need not a minister, someone from among themselves, one who has lived the same and chosen life." Hunt nodded. "There is Lieutenant Nakamura, senior by rank. It seems he has already made that step." On the 25th of June, Hunt called Nakamura. "Lieutenant, help those who cannot accept reality. I cannot order them to live. You can. I am not a commander. I am a prisoner. To them, you are a commander." Nakamura was silent for a moment. "We have bushido, the way of the warrior. According to it, when you cannot die in battle, you must die with honor. We did not commit seppuku. For many that is worse than death." "For you as well?" Pause. "Earlier, yes. In the first days I looked for a way to die. Then I understood. Dying is easier. Living is harder. Perhaps living is the greater duty." "Explain." "After the war, someone must tell the truth. Why we lost, what really happened. The dead do not speak. Those who survived will." "Do you believe this?" "I am trying to." "Tell them that." That evening, Nakamura gathered barrack number 17. He stood in the middle of the room, they on their bunks, silent. "I know your shame and your anger," he began. "I wanted to die as well. But I understood. We are alive not because we are weak. We are alive because the war still goes on. And when it ends, the truth will have to be told. Perhaps it will be us." Some nodded, some looked away. And if Japan does not want to listen, Kubo asked, we will say it anyway. Even if they kill you for it, Nakamura smiled faintly. For Japan, we are already dead. What more can they take from us? There was no answer, but that night in barrack number 17, there was not a single suicide attempt for the first time in a month. On the 5th of July, 1943, the Camp Claiborne Mess Hall served barbecue. The Independence Day of the United States is celebrated on the 4th of July, but in the camp, they moved it to Friday, easier to organize. Lieutenant Colonel Hunt decided the holiday would be for everyone, including the prisoners. The camp cook, Sergeant William Thompson, 48 years old, a former restaurant owner from New Orleans, cooked by a family recipe. Pork marinated in a sauce of tomatoes, vinegar, brown sugar, and spices. Slow grilled for 8 hours. The smell of smoke spread through the camp from 10 in the morning. The prisoners did not know what barbecue was. They had not tasted such pork. In Japan, meat rarely reached the table, perhaps tonkatsu in a restaurant. The usual ration was rice, fish, vegetables. At 5 in the evening, they were invited to the mess hall. On the tables, piles of meat, corn on the cob, potato salad, baked beans, white bread. Private Tanaka looked at the plate, not knowing where to start. A piece of dark brown meat the size of a palm in a glossy sauce. The aroma, slightly sweet, smoky, with a sharp note. Is this meat? He asked Sato. Seems so. Interpreter Yamada heard, pork, barbecue, a traditional American dish. Tanaka cut a small piece and carefully placed it in his mouth. The taste, complex and new, sweet and sour at once, smoked, juicy to the last drop. He chewed slowly, trying to parse the sensations. It was delicious, very. And that was what frightened him. He remembered dinner at home in Yamaguchi, tatami on the floor, a low table, a bowl of rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, a small piece of boiled fish. Father opposite, mother beside. They ate in silence, not from quarrel, but from respect for the food. After the meal, father always said, Gochi sosama deshita, thanking not the cook, but the food itself. And now, in an American camp, he was eating more meat than his family saw in a year. And he liked it. Somehow that felt wrong. He set down the fork. Sergeant O'Hara, sitting beside him, noticed. Tanaka, eat. I cannot. Why? Not tasty? The opposite. Too good. O'Hara understood. He felt something similar, but drew a different conclusion. We cannot change what is. We cannot return home right now and feed our families. The only thing we can do is survive. And to survive, we must eat. It is unjust. My family is hungry, and that is exactly the injustice. But your refusal will not feed them. You will only grow weaker. And then what? Tanaka was silent, picked up the fork again, and finished. After dinner, the Americans set off a small fireworks display. War demands economy, but a few rockets rose into the sky. Red, white, and blue bursts, the colors of the flag. The prisoners stood on the parade ground and looked up. In Japan, fireworks glow at Obon, when ancestors are honored, a bridge between the living and the dead. Here, the celebration of independence, freedom, the victory of 1776. Private Yamamoto thought, for Americans, freedom is a real value remembered for 167 years. And for the Japanese, what does freedom mean for them? He had no answer. Captain Stevens stood beside Hunt. They are watching the fireworks. I see. Do they understand what we celebrate? I do not know. Perhaps it seems strange to them. A holiday in the middle of a war. Hunt smiled. We are Americans. We always celebrate the 4th of July. Even at war. On the 12th of July, 1943, Private Mori Shinichi escaped from the camp. Mori, 26 years old, a Tokyo native, the son of a Ministry of Education official, was one of the quietest men. He kept to himself, avoided the communal prayers by the altar. On the evening of the 11th, he complained of a headache. The nurse gave him aspirin. He went to bed earlier than the others. At night, about 2 o'clock, he got up, dressed, took a blanket, and quietly left the barrack. A cloudy, moonless night hid him from the guards' eyes. The camp fence, 3 meters high, wooden posts, barbed wire on top, without electricity. Mori threw the blanket over the wire, climbed across, and dropped to the other side. He ran. Morning roll call revealed the absence. Stevens counted 3 times, 183 instead of 184. An escape, he told Hunt. They called Nakamura. Who? Private Mori Shinichi, quiet. Why did he run? Pause. Perhaps he could not bear to live. Hunt did not argue. He ordered Lieutenant James Walker, head of the camp police. Search, 2 shepherd dogs, 10 men, 3 jeeps. Radius, 10 kilometers. Yes, sir. They found him in 4 hours. Mori sat on the bank of the Red River, 5 kilometers from the camp, knees hugged, staring at the water. Nearby, a stone and a rope, taken it seemed from a farm fence. Walker understood. He had gone not to flee, but to drown himself. Why did you not do it? He asked softly in English, knowing he would not be understood. Mori raised his eyes, an empty look and barely audibly, Kawai. A soldier who knew a little Japanese translated. He says, I am afraid. Mori wanted to die, but he was afraid. He had sat for 4 hours with the stone and rope, trying to force himself to jump. They returned him to the camp and placed him in the medical ward isolation room, not as punishment, but for observation. Captain Gregory examined him, physically healthy, mentally, deep depression, suicidal intent. He truly intended to drown, Gregory said. The classic method, a stone tied to the body, then into the water. Why did he stop? Hunt asked. Either he changed his mind, or fear proved stronger. Hunt called the chaplain, Jenkins. One prisoner tried to take his life. Speak with him. I am not a psychiatrist, Jenkins hesitated. None of us is a psychiatrist, but we have to do something. Jenkins came with Yamada to interpret. Mori sat on the bed, staring at the wall. Mori-san, I would like to speak with you, the chaplain said gently. Silence. Why did you want to die? Silence. Life is a gift. Mori spoke, evenly and quietly. Life is not a gift. Life is duty. My duty is to serve the Emperor. I did not fulfill it. I surrendered. My life has no meaning. And if duty now is different, Jenkins asked carefully. To survive, to return, to tell the truth. For the first time, Mori looked directly at him. A spark of interest appeared. Who says that is my duty? No one. Perhaps you can decide yourself. Decide duty by myself? That does not happen. Duty is given by the Emperor. And if he is far away, if you are here and must choose yourself, a long pause. If there is no duty, why live? The chaplain had no answer. Mori spent a week in isolation. Each day he was visited by Gregory, Jenkins, or Nakamura. Gradually he began to talk about his family, Tokyo, conscription. On the 20th of July, he was returned to the barrack under constant watch. Nakamura organized shifts. Every 2 hours someone sat beside him, spoke with him, distracted him. It helped. By the end of the month, Mori began to eat normally, to go out for exercises, even to smile at times. But at night he still looked out the window toward the river. Nakamura understood. The battle continued. On the 25th of July, 1943, Private Kubo Tetsuo received a letter. Not from his wife, from the Red Cross, with information about his family. Captain Stevens summoned him to the administrative building. In his hands, a white envelope with a red cross. Kubo-san, he began through Yamada, the Red Cross has sent information about your family. Kubo froze. Are they alive? Stevens read slowly so Yamada could translate. Your wife, Kubo Yuki, and your daughter, Kubo Ayako, reside in the Tennoji district, Osaka. As of May 1943, both are healthy. Your wife works at a textile factory. Your daughter attends elementary school. The world narrowed to 3 words. Alive, healthy, school. May I write to them? He managed. Stevens and Yamada exchanged glances. You may, the captain answered cautiously. But I cannot guarantee the letter will arrive. The Japanese authorities do not always deliver correspondence. I understand. I still want to try. That evening, Kubo sat to write. 3 hours. Corrections. Crossings out. Rewriting. Dear Yuki, I am alive. I know you have been told that I died. But I am a prisoner of the Americans. I am treated well. I am healthy. There is enough food. I think of you every day. I think of Ayako. She is already 6. Does she remember me? I do not know when I will return, or if I will return at all. But I am trying to live not because it is easy, but because I want to see you. Embrace Ayako. Tell her that her father loves her, and that her father asks forgiveness. Your husband, Kubo Tetsuo. Yamada passed the letter to Stevens. He checked it. No forbidden information. They sent it. Geneva, Lisbon, Japanese ship, Yokohama. This letter arrived, not because of a change in policy, because of a human factor. The clerk processing Red Cross mail was named Tanaka Hiroshi, 38 years old, a mid-level employee of the Ministry of Home Affairs. He had a son, Private Tanaka Keiji, 20 years old, somewhere in the south, and for half a year, no news. Holding Kubo's letter, Tanaka thought, what if my son is alive as well, also a prisoner, and someone is tearing up his letters too? He broke the instruction. He did not destroy the letter. He wrote down Yuki's address, and in the evening, after his shift, he quietly dropped the envelope into a mailbox near Tennoji Station. Kubo Yuki received it on the 8th of September, 1943. Returning from a 10-hour shift at a parachute factory, she opened the mailbox. At the table, Ayako was doing arithmetic. Yuki tore open the envelope and read the first line. I am alive. Her husband's handwriting. She would have recognized it among thousands. Tears rolled of their own accord. Mother, why are you crying? Ayako ran up. Yuki hugged her tightly. Father is alive. Your father is alive. Ayako was confused. They had told her that her father had died as a hero. A memorial tablet with his name stood on the household altar, and her mother prayed every day. But father died. No, he is alive. He is in captivity, but alive. Yuki read the letter 5 times, hid it in the chest under clothing, so that no one would find it. She could show nothing to neighbors or relatives. For them, her husband had to remain dead. But she knew the truth, and that was enough. That night she slept peacefully for the first time in a year and a half. On the 10th of August, 1943, Lieutenant Colonel Hunt offered the prisoners a chance to study English. Not as an order, as an opportunity. Whoever wishes may attend classes 3 times a week for 1 hour. Sergeant Yamada will teach. 15 signed up. Among them, Lieutenant Nakamura, who already spoke English and wanted to improve his grammar. Privates Tanaka, Sato, Kubo, Yamamoto, and Sergeant O'Hara. The first lesson took place on the 13th of August in the mess hall. They pushed the tables together and set chairs in a semicircle. Yamada stood by the board, a piece of painted wood, white and yellow chalk. Good afternoon, he said in English. The chorus replied awkwardly, Good afternoon. Not afte, but after. Tongue to the teeth. Afternoon. Yamada smiled. They repeated, better, but with an accent. On the board appeared, Hello, my name is... A basic formula, he explained in Japanese. Greeting and introduction. Hello, my name is... And your name. Tanaka, try. Hello, my name is Tanaka. Good. Sato? Hello, my name is Sato. One by one, they said their names in English, quietly, unsure, but earnest. Yamada felt a strange mix of feelings. Born in Japan, raised in Seattle, English had become his native tongue. Japanese remained the language of home. Now he taught English to Japanese, taught the enemy the language of his country. Though with each lesson he saw them less as enemies, and more as people trying to stay afloat. Classes continued through August and September. By the end of September, the group had mastered about 200 words and simple phrases. I am hungry. Where is the bathroom? Thank you for the food. Short conversations with the guards appeared. One day by the barrack, Corporal McNeil from Iowa talked with Yamamoto. You farm before war? He asked in broken English. Yes, I am a farmer, corn and pigs. Yamamoto did not understand pigs, traced a curly tail in the air. McNeil laughed. Yes, pigs. Japan, no pig. Rice. Rice farm. Rice farmer? Yes, 15 minutes. About farms, weather, and waiting for rain. The English limped, but the meaning was shared. He is a farmer, like me, McNeil later told Stevens. An enemy, and a farmer. He waited for rain, I wait for rain. Perhaps you are not so different after all, Stevens replied. That is exactly what I thought. On the 25th of September, 1943, a radio appeared in the camp. Formally, it was for the American soldiers, but it stood in the mess hall, and the prisoners heard the news during lunch. Hunt did not forbid it. They have the right to know what is happening. The broadcasts were in English. Most understood nothing, so after lunch, Nakamura summarized. That day, the announcer declared, Italy had surrendered. The government of Marshal Pietro Badoglio had signed terms of unconditional surrender. Italian forces had ceased resistance. Silence. Italy, an ally of Japan, had capitulated. So it is not only we who surrender, O'Hara said quietly. Italians are not us, someone objected. Europeans, a different culture. Even so, an entire country, O'Hara insisted. Unexpectedly, Mori, the same man who had tried to drown himself, spoke up. Perhaps surrender is normal. What do you mean? Nakamura asked. The Italians surrendered, and what then? They were not massacred. The Americans did not erase Italy. Capitulation is not always the end. Sometimes it is a way to stop death. For them, perhaps, O'Hara shook his head. For the Japanese, no. The emperor will not surrender. And if he does? Impossible. He is a god. Italians also thought their leader would not surrender, Mori replied softly. Such conversations repeated weekly. The news piled up one after another. On the 8th of October, Allied advances in Italy. On the 15th of October, fighting in the Pacific, the landing on Bougainville. On the 22nd of October, the bombing of Rabaul, the main Japanese base in Papua New Guinea. Each broadcast, another step toward the inevitable. The prisoners understood it, even if they waved it off. On the 5th of November, the announcer reported, the Americans had captured an airfield on Bougainville. Japanese forces had retreated. Japanese losses? About 2,000. Nakamura's voice trembled. 2,000 in a single battle. How many of us are in the camp? Kubo asked. 184. Then in one battle more died than all of us here. Silence. And we are alive, Kubo added. We surrendered, and we are alive. Are you saying we did the right thing? O'Hara snapped. I am only saying that we are alive, and 2,000 are dead. Which of us is right? No one found an answer, and that evening O'Hara stared a long time into the dark ceiling, turning over that, who is right? And found no answer either. On the 25th of December, 1943, Camp Claiborne celebrated Christmas. The prisoners were not Christians and did not understand the meaning of the holiday, but the Americans wanted to share it. In the morning, Sergeant Thompson set to an extra menu, a whole turkey with stuffing of bread, vegetables and spices, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, apple pie. At 5 in the evening, an invitation to the mess hall. Inside, a Christmas tree, paper garlands, candles on the tables. Lieutenant Colonel Hunt stood at the entrance. Merry Christmas, he greeted each man. The prisoners nodded politely, not understanding the words but catching the tone. Chaplain Jenkins offered a prayer. Yamada translated, Today we remember the birth of Christ. Even in the darkness of war, we remember light, hope, and that all people are brothers. Dinner began. There was enough turkey for everyone. Thompson had ensured it. Each received a generous portion of meat, potatoes, sauce, pie. Tanaka ate slowly. He was tasting turkey for the first time. The flavor was unfamiliar, not fish and not pork. A somewhat dry meat brought to life by the sauce. Tasty, he said to Sato. Very, Sato nodded. They ate in silence, trying not to imagine that at home, in Japan, their families likely had only a modest supper. Then the Americans suggested singing. Silent Night, Jingle Bells, White Christmas sounded. The prisoners did not know the words, but they listened. And something in the musical phrases touched them quietly. After several songs, Nakamura approached Hunt. Sir, may we sing as well? Of course. What song? A Japanese song about home. They sang Furusado, hometown, a simple melody about mountains, rivers, and the place one always wishes to return to. The Americans listened in silence. They did not understand the words. They understood the longing. When the last syllable faded, silence fell. and then Corporal McNeil began to applaud, and the others joined. The prisoners looked on in surprise. The enemy applauded their song about home. Kubo felt his eyes moisten. He wiped them quickly. He did not want anyone to notice. After the singing, Captain Stevens handed out small gifts: a Red Cross parcel, a pack of cigarettes, a chocolate bar, a notebook, and a pencil. The prisoners held the gifts uncertainly. Christmas was not their custom. Yamamoto opened the notebook, wrote on the first page, the 25th of December, 1943, and below it, "Today the Americans gave us gifts. I do not understand why. We are enemies, but they shared food, music, things. Perhaps war is a mistake. Perhaps people are not meant to be enemies." He closed the notebook and hid it under his pillow. That same evening by the Shinto altar, Nakamura spoke a prayer for peace, for families, for the fallen. American guards stood by the doors. "They are praying," McNeil whispered to Lieutenant Walker. "Yes. Do their gods hear us? I do not know, Jim, but if there is one God, he must hear them too." The night proved quiet, starry, winter chilly for Louisiana. About 10 degrees, the prisoners slept under warm blankets with full stomachs. Somewhere in Japan, their families lived an ordinary day in a country slowly losing the war. They did not know this. They only knew that today the Americans had called them brothers. And perhaps, for just one day, they managed to believe it. The 1st of March, 1944, brought changes, not in the camp, but in the world. The radio in the mess hall poured out reports daily. Lieutenant Nakamura translated them for the prisoners. With each bulletin, it became more obvious. Japan was losing. January, the Americans took the Marshall Islands. February, a crushing strike on Truk, the main Japanese base in the Pacific. March, an Allied offensive in Burma. Japanese units retreated. The prisoners listened and remained silent. What can one say when one's country is falling back? Sergeant O'Hara, always the firmest in faith in the empire, suddenly said one evening, "Perhaps this is good." Everyone turned. "What exactly?" Nakamura asked. "That we are losing. Perhaps the war will finally end." "But that is Japan's defeat. The Emperor." "The Emperor is far away," O'Hara cut in. "We are here. What is their victory to us if we all die?" Silence fell. Private Mori, who no longer thought of death and no longer tried to escape, said, "I want the war to end, even if Japan loses. I just want to go home." "Home?" Fujita said skeptically. "You are a prisoner. For Japan, you do not exist." "What home?" "Any home, so long as it is not a barrack and not this camp." "Some Japanese homes are now worse than this barrack," someone added quietly. "I know," Mori replied, "but that is not my home." Such conversations became common. They spoke little of honor and duty. They spoke of fatigue, of return, of the end. On the 15th of March, Lieutenant Colonel Hunt summoned Nakamura. "There is news. The Red Cross has organized an exchange of letters through neutral countries. This time, they will get through." Truly, Nakamura could not believe it. "Yes, Switzerland and Sweden have agreed to mediate. The Japanese government will not be able to intercept them. Why now? International pressure. The Red Cross was preparing to publicize violations of the convention, so Tokyo made a compromise. How many letters are allowed? 1 per month, 1 page, no military details. We begin today." That evening, Nakamura informed the barrack. There was no joy. Instead, fear rose. "If we write, our families will know we are prisoners. That is shame," Hayashi said. "They already know," Nakamura replied. "They have already received notice of our deaths. Let them now learn that we are alive. Better a dead hero than a living traitor." Nakamura snapped, a rare occurrence. "Then let them consider us dead. But I will write. My mother must know that I am alive. Even if she disowns me, even if she burns the letter, she will know. For me, that is more important than honor." He went to administration, took paper and a pencil, and sat down. "Dear Mother, I am alive. I know a notice of my death has reached you, but I am alive and in the custody of the American Army. I cannot explain how it happened. I cannot justify myself. I can only say, I am alive and I think of you every day. If you do not wish to reply, I will understand. If you wish to forget, I will understand as well." I simply wanted you to know. Your son, Nakamura Tadashi. By the end of March, 120 of 184 had written letters. All the letters arrived through Switzerland, the Swedish mission in Tokyo, a system the Red Cross had fought for over many months. In April, 120 Japanese families learned their sons, husbands, fathers were alive. Some replied, some did not. Some burned the letter, some hid it and showed it to no one. Nakamura's mother replied, 2 short sentences. I am glad that you are alive. Come home when you can. In June, Nakamura held that scrap of paper and read it in a loop. He wept for the first time in 2 years. May of 1944 soaked you to the bone, up to plus 38 degrees Celsius and humidity near 90%. Working the fields was hard even for those used to heat. The work crew had grown to 60. They rode out to farms within a radius of 20 kilometers. Cotton, corn, vegetables. Some had already mastered tractors. Farmers marveled at how quickly the Japanese learned. On the 22nd of May, an incident occurred at McCarthy's farm. Tanaka and 12 prisoners were working a field. Corporal McNeil rested in the shade. He no longer kept his rifle at the ready. Over a year he had understood these men would not run. After 2 o'clock, a truck rolled up. 4 civilians in work clothes, between 30 and 50 years old. A tall man, face reddened by the sun, approached McNeil. Are these Japanese? Yes, sir. Prisoners. The man spat. The Japanese killed my son in the Philippines. Bataan. McNeil tensed. He knew about the Death March. April of 1942. More than 60,000 American and Filipino prisoners. Hundreds of kilometers under horrific conditions. Thousands dead. I am sorry, sir, but these men, they are Japanese. That is enough. The 4 headed toward the field. Hey, Jap! The tall man shouted. Tanaka turned. Do you understand English? Tanaka understood a little and nodded. Your friends killed my boy. Heard of Bataan? Tanaka nodded again, silently. My son died in hell. And you work here, get paid, and eat our food. Is that fair? Tanaka lowered his eyes. Sorry, he said, one of the first words he had learned. Sorry? The man snapped and swung his arm. McNeil managed to catch his hand. Sir, you cannot. They are protected by the Geneva Convention. What damn convention? My son is dead, and these, alive. The prisoners instinctively closed ranks behind Tanaka, not attacking, but shielding. The 3 other civilians came closer. Tension climbed. Hearing the shouting, McCarthy ran from the house. Heavy-footed, at 63 years old, one does not sprint in that heat. Harry, what are you doing? John, you know what they did to Tommy. I know, but these boys did not. They are Japanese. Tommy killed Japanese too. This is war. Soldiers kill soldiers. Bataan is not war. It is murder. Harry, McCarthy looked him straight in the eye. I knew Tommy since he was a child. He was a good boy. You suffer. I understand. But beating prisoners will not bring him back. I want revenge. On them? Look at them. Harry looked. Tanaka, short, gaunt, face dusty, hands trembling. He is afraid of you, McCarthy said softly. He is 20, a farmer's son, like Tommy. He is no more guilty of Bataan than Tommy was guilty of Pearl Harbor. Inside Harry, rage wrestled with reason. At last, he stepped back. Let's go. He threw to his men and, climbing in, turned back. John, I do not understand how you stomach working with them. Because they are people, like us, McCarthy answered. When the truck disappeared, McNeil walked up to Tanaka. You all right? Tanaka nodded, though his hands still shook. I understand. His son is dead. I understand. McNeil was surprised. The one nearly struck pitied the attacker. You are a good man, he said in Japanese, one of the few phrases he knew. Tanaka smiled sadly. No, I only understand. In the evening, Captain Stevens reported to Hunt. We cannot control civilians, Stevens weighed. If this happens again, it will not, Hunt cut in. I will speak to the sheriff. He will speak to Harry. His grief is understandable, but the law is the law. And if the prisoners refuse to work after this, we will ask. In the morning, Hunt summoned Nakamura and described the situation. If your men do not wish to go out to farms anymore, I will understand. We will go, Nakamura answered after a pause. Why? Because that man is not all of America. Mostly we are treated humanely. One angry voice does not cancel the rest. You are wise, Lieutenant. No, sir. I am simply tired of hatred. On the 6th of June, 1944, the radio carried something extraordinary. Early this morning, the Allies landed on the coast of Normandy. Operation Overlord, the largest seaborne invasion in history. More than 150,000 soldiers landed on 5 beaches. The camp erupted with joy, shouts, applause, embraces. The beginning of the end, the second front, at last, was open. The prisoners listened in silence. Nakamura translated, D-Day. The Americans and the British are in France. They begin pressing Germany. And what does that mean for us? O'Hara asked. That Germany will lose, and then Japan will be alone. Germany is far away. The war is won. We are in it together. Maybe it is good if Germany loses, Fujita said timidly. Then Japan will lose faster, and it will all end. You wish Japan's defeat? I wish the war to end. Many thought the same, only did not say it aloud. June and July brought further blows. Saipan, the first Japanese territory to pass under U.S. control. The Philippine Sea, a gigantic carrier battle. Japan lost more than 400 aircraft. Everything became starkly clear, not might lose, but will lose, now said aloud. On the 20th of July, another piece of news. An attempt on Hitler. A group of German officers tried to blow up the Führer at a headquarters in East Prussia. It failed. The plotters were executed. But the very fact meant, even in Germany, even among the military, there were people who wanted to stop the war. That evening, Mori said, German officers tried to kill their leader to end the carnage. And they died, O'Hara added dryly. But they tried. It means one can think against. In Japan, that is unthinkable. The emperor is a god, someone snapped. To the Germans, their leader was almost a god too, Mori replied softly. Nakamura listened and kept silent. He thought, and if in Tokyo there are also people who want an end, not everyone can believe in victory. He did not know. Those thoughts were closer to the truth than they seemed. In the capital, private conversations were already taking place in high offices about capitulation, not for the public, for that would be treason, but among those who understood the arithmetic of war. The prisoners in Louisiana knew none of this. They simply stood by the radio and listened as the world, theirs and others, changed inexorably. On the 6th of August, 1945, at 9 in the morning, the radio in the Camp Claiborne mess hall carried the news that broke history. President Truman announced, the United States has dropped a new weapon on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. An atomic bomb of colossal destructive power has destroyed the city almost completely. The number of victims, tens of thousands. On the word completely, Nakamura's voice, translating, broke. The prisoners did not understand. Atomic, what did that mean? A bomb is a bomb. How could it erase an entire city? The diameter of the destruction zone, approximately 2 kilometers, the announcer continued. Fires spread up to 5. This is the most powerful weapon ever used in combat. Hiroshima? My cousin lives there, Kubo said quietly. There was nothing to say. On the 9th of August, a second bomb. Nagasaki. Another city. Yet hundreds of thousands of lives in 3 days. Private Yamamoto, a native of Nagasaki Prefecture, did not cry. He sat staring blankly at the wall. His father, mother, 2 sisters were there. Whether they were alive, he did not know. Sergeant O'Hara, who had spoken for 2 years of honor and duty to the end, suddenly said, Enough. What? Nakamura did not at once grasp. Enough. Japan must surrender. Now. The emperor will not surrender. Then the emperor is killing his own people. At noon on the 15th of August, Tokyo time, Emperor Hirohito addressed the nation directly for the first time in history. In Camp Claiborne, the news was announced on the evening of the 16th. Japan has accepted the terms of the Potsdam Declaration. Emperor Hirohito has proclaimed unconditional surrender. The war in the Pacific is over. Lieutenant Colonel Hunt led everyone onto the parade ground. They formed ranks on their own. a habit of 4 years. "Gentlemen," he said through Yamada, evenly without triumph, "the war is over. You are no longer prisoners of war. You are former prisoners of war. No shouts, no tears, only silence. In the coming months, you will be repatriated. You will return home." The word home struck like a hammer. That evening all dispersed silently. They lay on their beds and stared at the ceiling. Tanaka thought of his Yamaguchi. Does the village still stand? Is his family alive? What would he say when he crossed the threshold? Kubo, of Yuki and Ayako. They knew he was alive, but would they accept him? Did he still have a home? Nakamura, of the country. A lost war, ruined cities, a new reality. What awaited them all there? Camp Claiborne closed in November of 1945. The barracks were dismantled, the fence removed, the land returned to civilians. But not everything vanished. In the U.S. National Archives lie the camp folders, reports, letters, medical cards, photographs. A dry chronicle of 2,360 people who spent here from a few months to 4 years. In Japanese archives, almost emptiness. The state preferred not to remember. People remembered. Private Tanaka Yoshio lived to 92. He married, raised 3 children, and again worked the rice fields. He was silent about the war. A year before his death, he gave an interview to a local newspaper. "I survived thanks to the Americans. They showed that the enemy can also be humane." Private Kubo Tetsuo returned to school. He taught in Osaka. His daughter Ayako recalled, "As a child, I did not understand why father was so quiet. When I grew up, I understood. He carried the guilt of a life he received in place of those who did not return. He lived 2 lives, his own and theirs." Lieutenant Nakamura Tadashi became a professor of history at the University of Tokyo. He wrote 2 books about prisoners of the Second World War. In the preface, "We thought capitulation was the end. It became the beginning. The understanding that humanity has no nationality. Respecting the enemy is not weakness, but strength." Corporal James McNeil returned to his farm in Iowa. He corresponded with Tanaka until his death in 2002. Their letters, in English and Japanese, sometimes through translators, are now in the World War II Museum in Des Moines. McNeil's last letter, a month before his death. "You were an enemy. You became an acquaintance. And now I think of you as a friend. If more people walked that path, there would be fewer wars." Lieutenant Colonel James Hunt retired in 1948 and died in 1977 in Louisiana. In his personal papers given to the archives is the Commandant's diary. The last entry, the 12th of October, 1945. "Today the last Japanese left the camp. I thought I would be glad. Instead, emptiness. For 4 years I was responsible for these men. They were enemies of my country, but under my watch they became simply people. I worry, what will happen to them? Will they be accepted at home? I will not know. This is not a story about heroism. It is a story about survival, about those who lost a country, honor, faith, and found something else. Not glory and not victory. The chance to go on living. In a world where capitulation equals death, they chose life. That choice is dearer than any medal. Today, 80 years later, on the site of Camp Claiborne, there is a small bronze plaque. On it, in 2 languages, here, in the years 1943 to 1945, Japanese prisoners of war were held. They came as enemies. They left as people. May their story remind us, even in the darkness of war, humanity is possible. Twice a year people come to the plaque, Americans whose grandfathers guarded the camp, and Japanese whose grandfathers were prisoners. They stand side by side and keep silence. In that shared silence lies the answer to the prisoner's question. Why did we survive? To bear witness. Humanity is stronger than enmity. Respect firmer than hatred. Even when the world loses its senses, there is another path. It requires courage, not to die for a country, but to see a person in the enemy. The prisoners of Camp Claiborne walked this path, from fear to trust, from hatred to understanding, from enmity to, perhaps not friendship, but mutual respect. A path painful, full of doubt, yet possible. In this lies the chief lesson of their story, not about a humane war, War is always cruel, about the fact that even during war, people can remain people, if they choose to. April 1941, Sahara, the sky above Tobruk. Oberleutnant Hans Joachim Marseille stares at the silhouette rapidly approaching. A thick fuselage, a heavy profile, and shark teeth painted on the nose. A P-40 Warhawk. He smiles. To him, it feels like duck hunting. He presses the triggers. The MG-17 machine guns burst into fire. The Warhawk rolls sharply, dives, and disappears into the blinding sun. But a moment later, the Bf-109 shudders from an impact. Marseille looks back. Unthinkable. The P-40 is already on his tail. This aircraft should not be able to maneuver like that. And yet, it does. By the end of 1942, the slow P-40 had shot down more than 700 German and Italian machines in North Africa. That same year, Marseille, the most successful Luftwaffe ace in African skies, was killed. His last battle was also against a Warhawk. This is the story of an aircraft that seemed doomed, but it triumphed. In the autumn of 1938, the Curtiss Wright Company presented the U.S. Army with a new fighter. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was, from the very beginning, a compromise. The designers took the airframe of the already outdated P-36 Hawk and fitted it with a more powerful Allison V-1710 engine, without a turbocharger, without a pressurized cockpit, without modern electronics. On October 14, 1938, its first flight. Maximum speed, 580 kilometers per hour at 4,600 meters. That was less than the Bf-109E, 560 to 570 kilometers per hour, slower than the Spitfire Mark I, up to 580 kilometers per hour, and even behind the Japanese A6M0, more than 530 kilometers per hour. In April 1939, the U.S. ordered 524 aircraft, not because of outstanding performance, but because the P-40 could be built quickly and in large numbers. By December 1941, the U.S. Army Air Forces had received more than 1,500 P-40s of various modifications. Another 3,000 went to allies: Britain, the Soviet Union, China, Australia. But the most important chapters of this aircraft's history were not written in the jungles of Burma, nor over the Aleutians. They were written above the sands of Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia, where the P-40 faced the Luftwaffe's aces and managed to survive. January 1941. El Adem, Libya. Sergeant Clive Caldwell slowly climbs out of the cockpit of his P-40B. Sand crunches under his boots. The temperature, more than 42 degrees Celsius. The metal of the fuselage so hot, it burns his hands. Caldwell, an Australian pilot of No. 3 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. In North Africa, only 3 weeks. His aircraft still smells of paint and oil. On its nose, the famous shark teeth, copied from the Flying Tigers in China. He stares into the horizon, quivering in the shimmering heat. Here, there are no shelters, no safe place for an emergency landing, only sand, stones, and the enemy. The P-40 in these conditions had clear weaknesses. The Allison V-1710 engine suffered from sand, filters clogged within hours. Mechanics installed additional Vokes, dust filters under the nose. They reduced speed by another 15 kilometers per hour, but without them, the engine barely lasted a week. Armament of the P-40B was also inferior. In the wings, 4 Browning 30 caliber 7.62 millimeter machine guns. In the nose, 2 heavier 50 12.7 millimeter Brownings. By contrast, the Bf-109E carried 2 20mm MG-FF cannons and 2 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns. The Italian Machi C-202 had 2 12.7mm Breda Safat guns. But the main problem was altitude performance. The Allison without a turbocharger lost power above 4,500 meters. The Bf-109 remained strong up to 6,000 or 7,000. That meant one thing: in vertical combat, the P-40 was doomed. Caldwell remembers that morning. He saw his first Messerschmitt. It appeared suddenly at more than 6,500 meters like a hawk. The P-40 struggled to raise its nose upward. The Bf-109 made a single pass, shredded a British Hurricane, and vanished. In North Africa, there were no thick clouds, no forests, no mountains to hide in, only clear sky and endless desert. The P-40 had to learn to fight in a world for which it was not built, or be left forever as wreckage in the sand. February 5th, 1941. The sky above Benghazi. Number 250 Squadron, Royal Air Force, and takes off. 12 P-40B fighters. Mission: cover a convoy from Italian bombers. Leading the formation, squadron leader Major Patrick Daniel, age 34. Behind him, the campaign in France, flights in hurricanes, the experience of real war. He had taken the cockpit of a P-40 only 3 months earlier. At 11:47, a dry voice cuts through the radio. Bandits, 20 plus, altitude 5,000, course 180. It is the Italians. Probably Fiat BR-20s with escort of Fiat G50s or Machi C200s. Daniel orders a climb. Engines roar, but the P-40s struggle to gain height. Rate of climb, 10 meters per second. For comparison, the Bf-109. E climbs at 17, the Spitfire at 15. On the horizon appear the bombers in tight formation. Above them, 9 Machi C200s. Sleek, elegant, with rounded fuselage lines. Daniel realizes intercepting from above is impossible. The only chance? A head-on attack. He pushes the stick forward. 12 Warhawks dive straight at the Italians. Speed builds, 450, 500, 550 kilometers per hour. Fingers on the triggers. The enemy leader spots the threat in time. His group scatters. 3 Machi turn head-on. Distance shrinks, 800 meters, 600, 400. Daniel fires. 250 caliber Brownings blaze in long bursts. Tracers slash the sky. 1 Machi cannot evade. Rounds rip into the wing, tear off an aileron. The aircraft flips and spins into a fatal dive. The first victory for the P-40 in North Africa. Time, 11:54. The battle lasts only 8 minutes. Chaotic, close, at low altitude. The P-40s avoid prolonged turning fights. Hit with speed, then break away. No dogfight. Result, 2 Machi C-200s destroyed, 1 damaged. P-40 losses, none. But Daniel knows well, the true enemy still lies ahead. February 1941. Tripoli. On the piers, German transports. Tank after tank, artillery, columns of trucks. To Africa arrives Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps. Together with the armor come the fighters. Jagdgeschwader 27, JG-27. One of the strongest Luftwaffe units. 3 groups, 120 pilots, 90 Bf-109E. Commanded by Major Edward Neumann. 29 years old, 13 confirmed victories in the West. Cold-blooded, precise tactician. On February 14th, JG-27 launches its first combat mission. Task: patrol over the front. Neumann expects to meet the same old hurricanes. Easy prey. But on the horizon, completely different silhouettes. 12 aircraft with broad wings and a massive nose. Shark teeth painted along the fuselages. P-40s. Neumann immediately gives the order. 8 Bf-109s climb to 5,500 meters and dive. Standard Luftwaffe tactics: altitude, speed, sudden strike. The P-40s scatter. Neumann targets the one on the far left. 400 meters. A burst from the cannons. But the Warhawk jerks right and plunges down. The German tries to follow, but the American is already lower, pushing 600 kilometers per hour. The fight lasts only 3 minutes. 1 P-40 is shot down, the rest vanish into the shimmering desert. In his report, Neumann notes, "The enemy is using new American fighters, high speed in the dive. They avoid vertical combat." He does not yet know. These Warhawks will become his chief nightmare for the next 2 years. March 1941. Sidi Barrani, Airfield, Egypt. Commander of No. 3 Squadron RAF, Captain Bobby Gibbs, gathers 30 pilots. Most are rookies. Average flight time, only 150 hours. Against them stand Luftwaffe veterans with Battle of Britain experience. Gibbs speaks plainly. The P-40 will not beat the Messerschmitt in a classic fight. Forget dogfighting, we fight by different rules. He lays out 5 principles. Never climb against the Bf-109. The Germans are always higher and faster. Whoever tries to meet them head-on is doomed. Use weight and speed. Full weight of the P-40, 3.8 tons. In a dive, it can accelerate to 700 kilometers per hour. The Bf-109 cannot endure that without risk of breaking apart. If the enemy is on your tail, go down. No sharp turns. Only a dive, as close to the ground as possible. The P-40 can withstand 12 G, while the Messerschmitt only 8. Fly in pairs. One distracts, the other attacks. The loner dies, the pair survives. Never accept combat on the enemy's terms. If the German has the advantage, dive away and disengage. A pilot's life is more valuable than the aircraft. These rules were not Gibbs's invention. They were forged by the Flying Tigers in China, fighting with P-40s against Japanese Zeros under Claire Chennault. Now they would become the foundation of survival in Africa. On March 26, 1941, Gibbs tests the tactics in battle. 6 P-40s intercept a group of Bf-109s near Tobruk. The Germans are higher, 5,800 meters. The P-40s only 3,500. Gibbs does not climb. He waits. The Messerschmitts dive. The Australians scatter and dive as well. The Germans cannot turn fast enough. The P-40s are already at the deck, racing at 650 kilometers per hour. One German tries to pursue. Gibbs throws his plane hard left, then right. The G-forces press him down. Darkness creeps into his vision. But the machine holds. The enemy breaks off. Result: no enemy shot down. But not a single Australian lost. All 6 returned to base. And that, too, was a victory. April 1941. Ain el-Ghazala, Libya. A new pilot joins JG-27. Lieutenant Hans Joachim Marseille, 21 years old. Blonde curly hair, confident smile, eyes of a gambler. Marseille, a Berliner, son of a Luftwaffe officer. In the sky since 1938. In the Battle of Britain, he found no triumph. 4 Spitfires downed, himself shot down twice. Reputation: talented but undisciplined, taking risks without need, arguing with orders. Africa changes him. The desert demands precision. Here, there are no clouds to forgive mistakes. Here, a mistake equals death. Marseille begins to study the opponent, watches the P-40s, notes their maneuver patterns. He sees the American planes avoid verticals, always dive down, relying not on agility, but speed. He builds counter-tactics. Instead of long pursuits, short, sharp strikes. Instead of long bursts, 1 or 2 seconds of pinpoint fire. He spends hours practicing shooting, honing aim to reflex level, firing almost instinctively. By July 1941, his tally reaches 15 victories. By September, 48. By December, 68. Marseille becomes a legend, the star of Africa, the Luftwaffe's most successful ace in this theater. But most of his kills are not over P-40s, more often Hurricanes, Curtiss bombers, or light aircraft. The Warhawk remains tough prey even for him. On September 1st, 1942, above Alam el Halfa, he attacks a formation of P-40s from No. 112 Squadron RAF. The classic tactic: altitude, speed, surprise. But the Warhawks scatter. One plunges, another rolls right, a third turns head-on. Marseille picks a target, a short burst. Shells rip the wing of the P-40, but the aircraft does not fall. The pilot drags it out of the dive, skimming the ground. Marseille tries to chase, but the P-40 is too fast down low. The conclusion is clear: the Warhawk rarely falls after a single strike. Repeated attacks are needed, and each is a risk of facing return fire. In his diary, he notes, "The P-40 is a heavy opponent. It avoids direct combat. Patience is required." A year later, Marseille will die, not in battle, but from an engine fire on return from patrol. Yet his approach remains in the unit, and the P-42 continues its fight. June 1941. Skies over Syria. Sergeant Clive Caldwell has 3 victories. all against French Dewoitine D-520 during the campaign against the Vichy regime. Fast and agile fighters, but their controls floated in a dive. Caldwell noticed and exploited it. On June 26th, he patrols over Damascus. 8 P-40s at 4,200 meters. Mission: cover the ground attack aircraft. At 14:30, the Germans appear. 6 Bf-109F from JG, 27, newer, faster, with heavier armament, a 20mm MG-151 in the nose, and 2 MG-17 of 7.92 millimeters. They are higher, about 6,000 meters. The standard Luftwaffe pattern: dive, shoot, extend. Caldwell does not panic. The order: scatter and go down. The P-40s plunge, speed building, 600, 650 kilometers per hour. The Friedrichs give chase, but at high speed they are less stable. Caldwell snaps the nose up, rolls, and pops beneath the belly of the German leader. Distance: 300 meters. Perfect position. He squeezes the triggers. The 50 Brownings stitch the lower fuselage. Metal tears. The radiator bursts into steam. The Messerschmitt tries to climb. But the engine smokes. The aircraft falls trailing a black plume. The pilot ejects at roughly 1,500 meters. Caldwell's fourth victory, and his first Bf-109F. By war's end, he will become the most successful Allied ace in North Africa. 22 confirmed victories, all in the P-40. Caldwell's secret: discipline, no unnecessary risk, never chase into the red zone, always keep fuel in mind. After every fight, notes: attack altitude, closure speed, angle, enemy reaction. He analyzes mistakes and adjusts techniques. In No. 3 Squadron, they call him Killer, not for cruelty, but for surgical precision. August 1941, Tobruk, Libya. The city has been under siege for 4 months. German and Italian forces have tightened the ring since April. The 9th Australian Division holds the line. Supply comes only by sea, convoys from Alexandria under cover of night. The P-40s operate from 3 forward strips around the city. Runways are merely compacted sand, with no concrete and no hangars. The aircraft sit in the open beneath camouflage nets. Every morning, Luftwaffe strikes. Ju 87 Stukas drop with sirens that tear through the desert silence. Explosions heave pillars of sand. Fragments scatter for hundreds of meters. The P-40s try to intercept, but always a little late. The Germans arrive at dawn when most machines are still on the ground. By the time the Warhawks are airborne, the bombers are already withdrawing under Bf-109 cover. On August 16th, Sergeant Peter Turnbull of No. 3 Squadron decides to act differently. He takes off at 5:30, before dawn. He climbs to 5,500 meters and patrols over the sea. At 6:15, the Germans appear on the horizon, 12 Ju-87s and 6 Bf-109E as escort. Turnbull is alone. He radios the field. Contact 12+6, course to Tobruk. He will not wait for support. He dives. The P-40 falls like a stone. Speed, 700. Attack out of the sun. The escort does not see him. Target, the left, Mostuka. Distance 200 meters. A short burst. The wing shatters. The Stuka flips and crashes into the sea. The Bf-109s react instantly. 3 fighters pounce on Turnbull. But he refuses to linger. He dives all the way to the deck. Speed holds above 600. The Germans cannot close the distance. He returns to base without a scratch, with 1 Ju-87 destroyed. Squadron Commander Captain Gibbs draws the conclusion. A purely defensive posture is doomed. If you wait for the blow, you will always be a step behind. From then on, the P-40s launch before dawn, patrol high, and strike first, out of the sun unexpectedly. The results show immediately. In September, No. 3 Squadron downs 18 German aircraft over Tobruk, while losing only 4 Warhawks. The siege will last until November, but Tobruk does not fall. The P-40s stand with the garrison. November 1941. Operation Crusader. The British 8th Army goes on the offensive. Objective: break the blockade and push Rommel back to Tripoli. Overhead operate more than 200 Allied fighters, half of them P-40s. The weather shifts. By day +25, by night only +5 degrees Celsius. The sharp swings punish machinery. Oil in the Allison thickens. Morning engine starts become a problem. Ground crews work without rest. Preheating engines before takeoff. Swapping spark plugs. Scouring filters of sand. Every sortie is the result of hours of preparation. On November 23rd, over Sidi Rezegh comes the campaign's largest air battle. 30 P-40s against 40 Bf-109s and Machi C-202s. The fighting starts at 11:20. The Germans attack from above. The P-40s scatter and drop as always. But this time, the enemy does not let go. They pursue, trying to drag the fight vertical. Sergeant Neil Cameron of number 112. Squadron finds himself in dire straits. 3 Bf-109s on his tail. Distance closing, tracers hiss past the canopy. Cameron makes an unexpected move. He chops throttle hard. He drops flaps and bleeds speed to about 300. The Messerschmitts, roaring along at 500, cannot slow in time and overshoot. Cameron retracts flaps, accelerates, and slides onto the leader's tail. 150 meters. A burst. Rounds rake the fuselage. The engine smokes. The aircraft falls. Thus a new tactic is born. Throttling. In a flat fight, the P-40 did not outturn the Bf-109, but it could outthink it. Battle outcome: 9 German aircraft destroyed and 5 damaged. The Allies lose 7 P-40s and 4 Hurricanes. The offensive succeeds. Rommel withdraws. By December, the Africa Corps falls back to El Agheila, about 500 kilometers. But the war is far from over. January 1942. El Agheila. Rommel regroups. New tanks, fuel, supplies from Europe. Reinforcements arrive for JG-27. Pilots hardened by battles on the Eastern Front. On January 21st, the Germans launch a counter-offensive. Tank columns roll eastward. In the sky, continuous clashes. Bf-109s against P-40s, every day. The Allies lose airfields one by one. Sidi Rezegh, Mesous, Benghazi. Squadrons are forced to retreat further east into Egypt. Losses mount. In February, No. 3 Squadron is left without 9 aircraft. No. 112 loses 11. No. 250 loses 7. The problem is not only the Germans. The P-40s are worn out. Those that arrived in 1941 now have 400 hours of flight time. The Allisons need overhauls, the airframes are cracked from stress, spare parts are scarce. Mechanics cannibalize wrecked machines to piece together one flyable plane. One aircraft might carry an engine from one shot down in November, a wing from a crash in December, and a tail pulled from storage. Lieutenant Jack Hamilton of No. 260 Squadron flies just such a machine. "My plane is Frankenstein," he writes home, "but it flies, and that's what matters." By March 1942, the Allies have lost half of Cyrenaica. The front halts at Gazala. The P-40s hold the line. But everyone knows this is only a pause. Rommel is preparing a new strike, May 26, 1942. Operation Theseus. Rommel unleashes his offensive along the Gazala line. 3 panzer divisions, 560 tanks, air support. His goal: break the defenses, capture Tobruk, and reach the Suez Canal. In the sky, the fiercest battles of the whole campaign. Up to 400 aircraft take off each day. Bf-109F, Machi C-202, Ju, 87s against P-40s, Hurricanes, and Spitfires. The P-40s perform several roles at once: escorting bombers, striking ground targets, engaging in air combat. The most dangerous task: ground attack. The Warhawk was not built for it, but circumstances force it. Pilots fly at 50 to 100 meters, strafing tank and truck convoys, infantry columns. Losses are enormous. German flak is dense. The 20mm Flak 38 throws up walls of fire. One hit to the engine, and the plane becomes a torch. On June 3rd, Sergeant James Edwards of No. 5 Squadron at CIAF attacks a convoy near Bir Hakeim. He runs in at 80 meters altitude. 450 kilometers per hour, hosing down trucks. Explosions, fire, suddenly, impact. A shell tears the left wing, the aileron rips away, the P-40 lurches violently. Edwards fights for control. The aircraft will not obey. He hauls the stick, trying to stay aloft. Altitude climbs slowly. 200 meters, 400, 600. The engine smokes, oil temperature surges. He cuts the motor, searches for a flat patch to land. Ahead, sand. He lowers the gear, the P-40 touches down, bounces, hits again. Gear collapses, the plane skids 200 meters and stops. Edwards climbs out without a scratch. The aircraft is wrecked, but he lives. 2 hours later, a British patrol finds him. The next day, he is flying another Warhawk. By June 13th, the Allies lose the Gazala line. British forces retreat into Egypt. On June 21st, Rommel captures Tobruk, but the P-40s do not vanish from the skies. They retreat with the army, relocate to new fields, and return to the fight. The war is only heating up. July 1942. El Alamein, 100 kilometers from Alexandria. Here Rommel is finally stopped. His army is exhausted, fuel and ammunition catastrophically short, supply from Europe cut off. The British 8th Army digs in at the last line before Egypt. In the skies, a balance forms. The Luftwaffe fields 200 aircraft, the Allies more than 500, half of them P-40s. By now, new versions are arriving. The P-40F and P-40L, with Packard Desai 1650 engines, a licensed Rolls-Royce Merlin, climb higher and hold power better. The P-40K and P-40M mount 650 caliber Brownings instead of 4. Major Clive Caldwell, now commander of No. 112 Squadron, receives his P-40F. He tests it above the desert, at 6,000 meters, 580 kilometers per hour, 40 faster than the older Warhawks. At last, we can fight on equal terms, he tells his pilots. On July 23rd comes the first great battle over El Alamein. 45 P-40s against 30, BF-109s and 20 Meiji C-202s. Altitude, 5,500 meters. For the first time, the Warhawks do not dive away. They meet the enemy head-on. Caldwell leads the squadron. The BF-109s are higher, at 6,200 meters. Before, that meant certain defeat. Now, a challenge. The command? Climb. The P-40F strain upward, the Merlin engines roaring. Rate of climb, 13 meters per second. Less than the Germans, but enough. The attack begins. The Germans dive from above. Caldwell does not dodge. He holds straight on. Distance closing, 1,000 meters, 700, 500. Both sides fire. Tracers cross the sky. Caldwell lines a BF-109F in his sight. Instinctive squeeze. 6 Brownings roar together. Bullets rip the engine bay. Explosion, fire, wreckage tumbles earthward. The fight lasts 13 minutes. Results: 11. BF-109s and 6 Machis destroyed. The Allies lose 8 Warhawks. For the first time in the Desert Campaign, the P-40s win a major battle without ceding altitude. October 23, 1942. Operation Lightfoot. General Bernard Montgomery begins the decisive offensive. 1,000 guns open fire simultaneously. The earth trembles. The night sky shatters with flashes. In the air, 1,200 Allied aircraft. 1/3 of them, P-40s. Their mission? Achieve total air supremacy. The Luftwaffe still tries to resist. JG-27 launches all available machines, 70 BF-109s. But it is not enough. The Allies strike in waves. As soon as 6 are downed, the next 12 are already overhead. Hans-Joachim Marseille no longer flies. On September 30th, he was killed, trying to bail out from a burning BF-109. His body was found 2 days later in the desert. Without him, JG-27 lost its strongest ace. Morale sank. The Germans grew cautious. The P-40s exploit this. They grow bolder, attacking even without numerical advantage. On November 2nd, Rommel receives Hitler's order, stand to the last. But there is nothing left to stand with. tanks without fuel, infantry without ammunition, the Air Force nearly destroyed. On November 4th, the Africa Corps begins retreat. Disorderly truck convoys crawl westward under constant air attack. The P-40s strike from low altitude. They rake convoys with tracers, torch trucks, and tanks, drive soldiers to abandoned vehicles, and flee on foot into the desert. By the end of November, Rommel has lost half his army. The Africa Corps ceases to exist as a combat force. The war in North Africa enters its final phase, January 1943, Tunisia. Rommel digs in at the last defensive line. The Germans hold a narrow strip between Tunis and Bizerte. Supply comes from Sicily, convoys across the Mediterranean. The Allies tighten the noose. From the west advance the Americans, landed in November during Operation Torch. From the east presses the British Eighth Army. In the sky, near total Allied control, the P-40s operate from dozens of airfields around Tunisia. Side by side, fight American, British, Australian, and South African squadrons, up to 300 machines at once. The Germans defend desperately. Fresh Luftwaffe units are thrown in, Bf-109G, with a nose-mounted MG-151 20mm cannon and two 13mm MG-131s, some equipped with 30mm Mk-108, and the new FW-190A, faster and tougher than earlier models. But numbers decide. For every German sortie, 5 Allied aircraft rise, and the Luftwaffe cannot replace losses. On February 19th, American P-40s of the 57th Fighter Group engage Bf-109Gs over the Kasserine Pass. The Germans are strafing a convoy. Captain Philip Cochrane leads 8 Warhawks. Ahead, 14 Messerschmitt striking trucks. Cochrane does not hesitate, he attacks. The battle rages at 200 to 300 meters. Here the P-40s are in their element, steady, obedient near the ground. The Bf-109Gs are faster in acceleration, but they need altitude. Cochrane falls in behind the leader. Distance, 100 meters. A short burst. The Bf-109's wing shreds. The plane smashes into the earth and explodes. 3 minutes, 4 Messerschmitts destroyed. American losses, 1 P-40. By April 1943, the Luftwaffe has lost the initiative completely. Every sortie risks immediate interception. On May 7th, the Allies enter Tunis. On the 13th, the German-Italian force capitulates. 250,000 prisoners. The war in North Africa is finished. The P-40 endured and prevailed. June 1943, airfield near Tripoli, now Allied. Clive Caldwell stands beside his P-40. The fuselage dented and scarred, patchwork seams, marks of field repairs. On the side, 22 red victory stars, each one a life story. The metal is warm in the sun. This plane carried him from Tobruk to Tunisia. 2 years, hundreds of sorties, thousands of kilometers above the desert. Caldwell remembers the first fight, January 1941, when everyone said the P-40 had no chance against the Bf-109, and when its shark teeth were laughed at. No one laughs now. The numbers are stark and convincing. P-40s flew more than 20,000 combat missions. They downed over 700 German and Italian aircraft. They lost about 400 of their own. Loss ratio, roughly 1.75 to 1 in favor of the Warhawk. Not perfect, but for an obsolete fighter at war's start, a triumph of endurance. The P-40 was not the fastest or most agile, did not have the best gun sight, but it was tough, and it forgave mistakes. Pilots knew, if the engine coughed in the desert, it could limp home on minimal power. If the wing was hit, it would not shear off at the first hole. If there was a chance, the Warhawk would bring you back. It was no beauty of the war, but a workhorse, plain, rough, effective. The story of the P-40 is the story of people who refused to quit when the odds were against them. Engineers who kept the planes flying without hangars or spares. Pilots who learned to claw out victory in an aircraft outclassed on paper. Yet still they won. After Africa, the Warhawk fought on. The Pacific, China, the Aleutians, Italy. It remained in service until 1944, when replaced by the P-51 Mustang and the P-47 Thunderbolt. In all, 13,738 P-40s were built, more than any other American fighter, except the Mustang and Thunderbolt. Today, the P-40 is a museum piece. A handful in private hands still fly at air shows. But its true fame lies not in aerobatics, but in the skies over Tobruk, El Alamein, and Tunisia, where every mission could be the last, and wrecks sank into the sand. The P-40 did not change the war's course, nor gain the legend of the Spitfire or Mustang, but it endured. In the darkest months of 1941 and 1942, when the Allies were losing everywhere, it held the skies over Africa, and that was enough. Clive Caldwell climbs into the cockpit one last time. He closes the canopy, starts the engine. The Allison V-1710 rumbles to life, propeller tearing dust into the air. Roll, lift. The P-40 rises into the clear African sky. Below, endless silent desert, and the sky is his.